My name is Kim Kosak, and we're starting a new series on neurodivergency. Here at Corazon Holistic Health, we work with a lot of people who have neurodiversity. And what does that mean? Well, Judy Singer in 1990 coined the term, and what it means is a natural variant in the way that your brain processes versus my brain processing. It's not something that needs to be fixed, it's something that needs to be understood. So what different kinds of things fall under neurodiversity? Well, that would be autism spectrum disorder, that would be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, or ADD. Both fall under that. There's other things that are a little less known, like Tourette's syndrome, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and a few other things. But those are the predominant ones that we see being diagnosed. And again, this is not something that needs to be fixed, it's something that needs to be understood. So we're going to interview some people who have been diagnosed with one of the things that I've talked about today. And we're going to talk about the differences and what difference it made in their life getting a diagnosis. But rather than hearing it from me, the clinician, I'd like for you to hear it from them. People who have lived this experience and can maybe help you understand your experience a little better. So thank you for tuning in. And here at Corazon Holistic Health, we're working very hard to make sure that everyone is getting the needs met that they have so that they can live their best, fullest life, because that's how we have true overall health. Thank you.
My dog's face is in the intro.
Harper is literally blocking your entire body.
Hi, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again for our series on neurodivergency. And we today are going to speak to someone who has kind of what we talked about before with the ADHD and the autism, and it's called AuDHD. And so we're going to be talking to Madeline today about that. Mm-hmm. Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Of course.
How are you?
Good.
Good. So, we really want to talk about like what your experience has been, right? So, prior to having a diagnosis, tell me kind of what you were experiencing in the world.
Before my ADHD diagnosis or before my autism diagnosis?
Wherever you want to start.
I'll start before the autism diagnosis.
Okay.
Before I came in here initially last year, I was severely dysregulated. I was dealing with a lot of familial trauma. I was dealing with an eating disorder, some relationship issues, and just a general sense of like never feeling like I belonged in the world, in the sense of I was always trying to like penetrate these bubbles. Yeah, I was always on the outskirts of the bubbles, and I could never really, I could tell there was something different about myself, that there was this sort of, I was an outlier, but I never had the language to understand like what that was.
Right. How did it show up for you? Was it relationships? Was it when you were trying to work? Like, where was this showing up and how was that showing up?
I mean, I think it showed up my entire life, even before it started to become an inherent disability in my life.
Right.
Like I think about like when I was a kid, the things that made so much sense when I found out I was autistic. Like, I wore palazzo pants from the 1st to the 4th grade. I refused to wear anything else. And I drew on the walls till I was 9. But it was also like, there were the quirks, but there was also milestones I wasn't meeting.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason it went undiagnosed for so long was because I was meeting all my major milestones early.
Yeah.
But it was the smaller ones. Like, I didn't learn to tie my shoes till I was 8 or 9. I wet the bed till 1st grade.
Yeah.
All of these little things that were sort of brushed under the rug because intelligence-wise, I was where I needed to be.
Right. And that's often what happens, right? You were smart.
Mm-hmm.
You're a girl and you were smart. And were you being disruptive in school?
No. And I was extremely articulate. And so I think that kind of made it sweep under the rug, but I always communicated kind of differently. I've been told I'm very blunt, very abrasive. And I think that's mostly just because I don't speak in subtext. I just...
Right.
I say what I think when I think it, and a lot of times people think that's rude because, especially in the South, just kind of sugarcoat everything.
Right. There's a fluffy way to say things, right?
And
Were you the little professor? Like, were you very articulate and you were very smart? So I'm guessing that were you coming across in that way? Did that affect you making friends when you were young?
I was always one of the biggest things I got called was a know-it-all.
Know-it-all. Yeah.
Um,
Was that confusing?
it was because I couldn't understand how people could not want proper information.
Right. What do you mean? Because you weren't wrong in what you were saying,
No,
right?
it was just like,
Right.
I know this thing. I
Yeah.
think this thing is cool. I want to tell you about it, and
Right.
then we can both be informed.
Right.
But people did not.
Well-meaning.
like that.
And I'm sure that was very confusing because you're
It
like, what am I
was.
doing wrong? I'm not wrong about this.
Mhm.
So what's the problem?
Yeah.
Did you have trouble making friends in school?
Very much so.
Yeah.
In elementary school, I didn't really have any friends. When I got to middle and high school, I would start making friends, and I would always, like I was saying, be on the outskirts of the bubble.
Yeah.
Like I was their friend, but I wasn't in the circle.
Yeah.
I couldn't break through. So I tended to bounce around from group to group,
Yeah.
trying to get in somewhere and never really achieving.
Yeah. How did that make you feel?
It's very isolating, very alienating,
Yeah.
and lonely.
Yeah.
I think loneliness is probably one of the biggest things that I've had to struggle with throughout my life,
Yeah.
and something that having the language for autism has helped me understand, help me
Yeah.
navigate, and learn to build meaningful relationships and not feel so unburdening or so burdened by loneliness all the time.
Right. And it started to develop some anxiety and depression for you, right?
Mhm.
Because this negative narrative of something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm different. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm doing to upset people or why I can't connect. And then I'm the problem.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety in early middle school when I was around 12 years old. And that was kind of always what everyone said was the issue. Was
Yeah.
I was depressed, I was anxious. There was never this sort of interest in understanding what the root cause of all of that was.
Right. The framework. That's what I was talking about, right? There was no framework to put that in. Not that those things weren't happening, but
Mhm.
what was the framework? Why was this happening? So you come in here and we start to talk about what's happening, and you had some inclinations that this might be true prior to coming in.
I did. I didn't come in seeking a diagnosis. That wasn't what I was here for. I was coming to address a lifetime of trauma and difficulties that I knew was in some way related to the fact that I already knew I was neurodivergent. I had an ADHD diagnosis, but it didn't feel like all the puzzle pieces were connected.
Sure.
And I think it was within 20 minutes of us talking that you looked at me and you go, have you ever had an autism diagnosis? And I think I just started giggling on your couch, like,
Yeah.
no, but yes.
Yeah, but yeah, but maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you're clearly very smart. At the time, you certainly were showing signs of depression and anxiety, but it didn't better explain how you were processing information, right, and how you were getting stuck. So since that time, what's changed for you? How has it changed?
I have having the language for it, being able to verbalize is something that's very important to me in understanding myself and how I show up in the world.
Yeah.
And having the language to understand, okay, this is what I'm going through. But also having the language and the recognition of the patterns that I was getting stuck in. What my body was doing, realizing that because of the alexithymia, I don't really mentally experience my emotions, I physically experience them.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to understand the bodily cues that my brain is creating,
Right.
so that I can understand that pattern, understand what's happening, and be able to address it before it becomes dysregulation.
Right. And it was hard sometimes to know what was happening, and I think one of the things I saw was that you had the ADHD diagnosis, and you were trying to make that work in the sense of, so if this is what I have and this is what's happening, why aren't I feeling better, right? And it's not that you don't have that, but it wasn't really the root cause of what was going on with relationships, with how it was becoming difficult to process trauma. So one of the things that I see is that trauma with autism is a very difficult thing to process through because of the special interest, the fixation, the language piece. Right? There's all these things that it kind of gets stuck and it ruminates and it lives in your body, and then all these things are happening, And then that creates a sense of not being safe, even more so than you're already experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be hard to work through. So what do you think has helped you work through some of that as you've recognized those patterns? What skills have helped you move through that?
I think one of the biggest skills has been, I don't know what you would call this, like body recognition.
Yeah.
Okay, we've worked on a lot of, what is my body doing?
Yeah.
What is the somatic experience? I know when my throat starts to get tight that the anxiety is starting to dysregulate me. That
Right.
I know when my eyes start to dart around the room, I'm getting overstimulated. It's the little things that my body is doing that my brain isn't necessarily processing, that I have to be like, okay, this is happening. What does it mean? What resources can I take
Right.
to re-regulate?
Right.
It's been in learning to set boundaries with family members and in my relationships so that there's clear communication, getting to understand this is what I need from you. And that also feeling like that's not too much. Being able to
Right.
know that it's okay to have needs. It's
That's
okay
right.
to ask for them to be met.
That's right. And I want to say something, because I think this is one of these misconceptions, is that if you get a diagnosis, then all of a sudden the onus is on everyone else to communicate with you differently. But I don't think that's true.
No.
You're working very hard to understand your own way of communication, what's working for you, what's not. You work very diligently on that, right? And managing, okay, if this is happening, what are my tools? What can I do in this moment to ask for what I need, right? To ask for the accommodation, do it. But you're meeting all your goals. What do you do right now?
I'm a costume designer, so
Yeah, you're in a graduate program.
I am.
And it's a very demanding role.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes long hours, and there's a lot of deadlines, and there's a lot of communication that has to happen. And it's noisy.
Yeah.
So how do you manage all that?
I've got my sensory resources.
Mm-hmm.
You recommended these to me, the loop earplugs,
Yeah.
and I recommend them to genuinely everybody. Like being able to put them in and drown out the excess noise, but having that mode where I can still engage with people.
Right.
Being able to recognize this environment's very overstimulating for me right now.
Yeah.
I need to take a 5-minute break. I think in most work settings you get like a 15-20 minute break every now and again. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I need multiple shorter breaks.
Yeah.
And being able to communicate with my boss who knows the issues that I go through. This is what I need to be most productive in this environment.
Right.
Being able to be flexible with my hours, because the thing about what I do is that the deadlines don't get pushed back.
Right.
the
The show must go on.
The show happens when the show happens.
Right.
And so it's sort of navigating, well, how can I find flexibility in the way that I work to accommodate my autism without falling behind?
There you go.
A lot of times it means coming in when nobody's there and doing work on my own. And that's something my boss has worked with me to give me the space to do so that I can get my work done.
Yeah. So at times when you haven't recognized early enough that you were starting to have this overload of your system and that you were starting to lose some of your capacity for things, how does that show up for you, and what have you done about that?
Yeah. I think you described it as autism catatonia.
That's right.
If I don't address my needs, I go into full sensory shutdown. I lose my ability to speak, and not necessarily because I can't speak, but because my own voice becomes a source of stimuli. It's painful to talk, to not only the physical action of it, but the sound of it, like taking in that stimuli. I become very tired, lethargic. I get really bad stomach issues, which is something I've dealt with my entire life.
Yeah.
Because all of my trauma, all of my dysregulation has gone straight to my gut.
That's right. And this isn't 5 minutes that this lasts.
No, it lasts, usually, depending on what I do for it, can last for multiple days. I can't do heavy light, and it can't be cool toned lighting. It has to be warm toned lighting. And I just need like a weight on me. So I go into my little dark room. I make time for myself. I check all my boxes for the people I need to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And I go and I sit silent in a dark room
Right.
with weight on top of me for as long as I need, eating only safe foods. Really, like, having to give myself complete lack of stimulation or sensory inputs that are comforting to me,
Right.
so that I can get back on track.
That's right.
But in those times, I physically can't go out in the world because my body just won't let me. I can't handle the inputs, and I'm not able to give outputs.
Right. And before all of this, when you didn't know what was happening, what was your narrative internally before you understood what was going on?
It's very much a self-loathing narrative. One of, well, why am I like this? Why can everybody else push through and I can't?
Yeah.
Why is my body failing itself? Because it genuinely does feel like your body, the one thing you have absolute connection to,
Yeah.
is glitching out on you.
Yeah.
Like it's deciding to just not do the one thing that it's supposed to do.
That must be scary to not be able to force it to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That idea that and that creates a disconnect, right? You're like, what is happening? Mentally, I want to go do the work. I want to finish the thing, right? Which starts a dialogue of what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? The rest of the world functions properly. There's something wrong with me, which then spikes anxiety and depression because now maybe I can't show up for work or I can't do this. I mean, that starts to spiral pretty quickly.
Yeah, and when that's the narrative, it becomes harder to come out of the catatonia.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the language to understand how to get yourself back on track.
Right.
Because the self-loathing language is what keeps you stuck in it.
It does. So last year you did something really big.
Yeah.
So you get this diagnosis, we're working through some trauma, we're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with some of the stuff, and you decide to do what?
I flew all the way across the world to Bali, Indonesia, and got my yoga instructor certification.
Yeah. That was a big thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
What made you make that decision?
Getting my instructor certification was always something I had wanted to do. And I was talking with a friend of mine who teaches at the studio, or taught at the studio that I now teach at. And she was telling me about this experience she had with this program and how life-changing it was and how she really could see me doing something like that. And my first thought was, I could never do something like that.
Right.
And I started thinking about it, and I thought, because I can't see myself doing this ever,
Right.
it might be the one thing that I actually need.
So why couldn't you see yourself doing it? What was telling you I can't do that?
The idea of being all the way across the world, out of my safe environment, without all of my safety resources, without family, without friends, without my cat,
Right? Your cat.
without all the things that give me comfort and have helped me regulate, not being able to access any of those.
Right.
And being in a country where I didn't speak the language, where I didn't know anybody, because I went by myself.
Right. Had you ever done that before?
No, this was my first solo travel experience, and it was the furthest I could possibly go.
Yes.
Exact opposite of the planet, 12-hour time difference.
Yeah.
And I get there, and I get off the plane. It's 40 hours of travel. I get there, I get through customs. It's about 2 a.m. I get to my hotel. So it's 2 p.m. here, and I call my mom, and I just started bawling on the phone. I was just like, what have I done?
Right.
And I was like, I can't undo this. I'm on the other side of the planet. Like, I have to see this through. There's no
Right.
other way. And once I was able to regulate, I think I slept for 48 straight hours.
Yeah.
Um,
And you went a little early, did you not, to give yourself
I
time
did.
to acclimate? Right.
I did. I knew not only because of the time change, but because of how I react to change, I was going to need time to acclimate.
Yeah.
And eventually I was able to immerse myself in this culture that I had never been around.
Right.
Get to do something I loved. I think it was helpful that this trip surrounded one of my special interests. It
Yeah.
made it easier to re-regulate because I was doing something that was giving me joy.
Yeah.
Um,
And moving your body
yeah.
as you're doing the yoga. This is helping your nervous system,
Mhm.
right? But still, not easy.
No. It was an incredibly difficult thing to do, but it was exactly what I needed, and what I gained from that trip, I see it incorporated every single day of my life.
That's right. And it seems like, oh, you went and got a yoga certification, but for you, this trip was so much more than that,
Mhm.
right? This was really challenging yourself, having to implement the skills that you had been practicing in a way that there was no safety net, right? And I'm sure, as we've talked about, there were many days that there were tears, and that there were shutdowns, and that you're eating foods that you don't know if are going to be safe foods for you, right?
Food was a huge thing there because they provided all the food and it looked amazing, and I'm sure most of it tasted amazing, but it was very sensory heavy. It was
Yeah.
bright colors, many textures, very aromatic. And I remember it was actually a nice little moment, but I started sobbing one day at dinner because I hadn't eaten a meal in several days. I'd eaten breakfast because there was always a safe food for me at breakfast, but
Yeah.
it's one meal a day.
Not enough, just when you're physically doing so much every day.
And I broke down, and this one girl who was in, there were two groups there, and she was in the other group, and she came up to me, and we had this wonderful little bonding moment because I found out that she also was autistic and was dealing with the same issue, and she was like, don't worry, I found a solution. And like apparently like you could order like stuff from the village to like come in, and she was like, I've been eating chicken nuggets for 5 days in a row.
Perfect.
And I ordered myself my safe food because luckily my safe food is pad thai, and I was in Indonesia.
And easy enough to get. Was it the best pad thai ever?
It was the best meal I have ever eaten.
Perfect.
But there were all of these new experiences that were pushing the bounds of what I was able to tolerate sensory-wise. And there were roadblocks.
Yeah.
But it also meant making those connections, finding somebody else who was autistic in the group, and being able to have that connection. And the two of us, we would regularly, like every once in a while, like come together and talk about like, how are you experiencing things right now?
I mean, that is really wonderful. The population is much higher than people think, right? It's just not something that people go around talking about all the time. But when you came back, you did talk to school differently about it. You did talk to work differently about it. And what's changed for you? How's this year at school and work different than last year at school and work?
It's night and day. Right before I started seeing you last year, and kind of the driving force to come see you was that my advisor had to sit me down and say, something's not working.
Yeah.
She's like, you're doing great in your classes, but when it comes to work, when it comes to showing up in the way that we need you to show up, in the way that you're going to need to show up in this field, you're not meeting the mark.
I bet that was really hard.
It was. And luckily she was very compassionate about it. She was like, what's going on in your life, and how can we address this and get you back on track? It was never a we're kicking you out of the program. It was just like, we need to figure out how to address this so that either you can take the time you need before coming back, or that we can get you where you need to be now.
Okay.
And it was very eye-opening. I wasn't present at work. I was off in my own mind. I was overstimulated. I was dealing with shutdowns more often. I was getting home, and when I would have all this homework I'd need to do, I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
Yeah.
And this year I've been able to go in having the language and the recognition of what's going on in my body and in my mind, and being able to set boundaries with myself in how I manage my work, and with my the people above me, my professors, my boss. I was able to gain disability resource accommodations, and I don't take them often, but having them is just
Right.
nice to have that fallback.
Yeah.
But it's being able to go in and communicate, this is how I work better.
Yeah.
This is how I will get my work done. Can we compromise to find a solution that's going to work for all of us and get us where we need to be?
And that seems to be working.
I haven't missed a deadline. My advisor actually told me that I'm the only grad student she's ever had that's never asked for an extension.
Wow. That feels good.
It did feel good. But I am not only meeting all of my deadlines, I'm not only getting my work done and growing and learning in that work, but I'm enjoying it. It doesn't feel like a chore anymore.
Yeah.
Which was really hard because I do something that I love and that
Right.
I'm super passionate about. So to be in a time of my life where I wasn't finding joy in my work, in my special interests,
Right.
that was really difficult.
Yeah.
And is a big part of the reason I was shutting down. I was like, I'm not even getting joy from the one place I get joy.
Right.
And that started to come back this year as I've been able to communicate what I need and understand what I need so that I can take it.
Yeah. And what I'll say is that this year, you also have a couple things that are different. You're in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You taught a class. You're teaching yoga. So you actually have more on your plate this year than you did last year,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're finding more joy overall in all of that. So tell me a little bit about adding these things and how, even though you added things, it somehow created balance for you.
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to be a professor eventually. I want to work in the field first, but
Yeah.
I do enjoy teaching and being someone who is very articulate and intelligence driven. That's always been something I wanted to do.
Sure.
And so incorporating that and having to deal with students and recognizing that, well, I've had issues that I've had to work with professors with.
Right.
Now I'm on the other side of that.
Right.
Having to figure out like where that compromise is. Well, are you getting what you need from my class? And managing my time, bringing in a relationship, like it's the first genuine relationship I've ever had with someone.
Yeah.
And it's one where I know that I need clear communication because all of the past relationships I've had have been built in me putting my needs second.
Right.
And that I'm finding that by putting my needs a priority to myself, asking for them to be a priority for someone else, but not compromising putting their needs
Right.
as priority as well,
Right.
it doesn't feel like it's emotionally exhausting. Like I don't feel like I'm giving more energy than I'm getting from it.
Right.
Because the communication is there to understand, well, what's working, what isn't, how do we navigate a relationship, how do we navigate life without it becoming burdensome to us.
Right.
And so I think just being able to openly talk about those things, being able to communicate, communicating with my bosses at the yoga studio, in what I need and working with my schedule, it's made it so that I can add these things in, but somehow I still have more time than I used to have.
Yeah, right? Because you have less dysregulation time. So you
Yeah.
spend less time managing the dysregulation than you were spending before.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing that has changed is your communication with family,
Yes.
right? And we did do some EMDR. We have done some other things around trauma. So, like, there's a multitude of things that we've worked on. But how has that made a difference? And how has your family been receptive to the change in communication?
I was really nervous about telling my family about my diagnosis at first because they definitely stigmatize it. I told my mom, and the first thing she said was, well, we just thought you were quirky. Which is, we just thought you were being Madeline.
Right.
Which is something you told me that
I
most
hear a lot. That's right.
parents
They're like,
say.
oh, that's a thisism or that ism, you know, right. So of the person's name. That's usually what happens. That's just them.
But I was worried about them receiving it negatively or like trying to gaslight me into thinking like, you don't have this, you're perfectly normal. When this is something I've genuinely struggled with my entire life. And there's a lot of trauma with my family. Having a parent with a debilitating chronic illness, and dealing with the abuse and neglect that have come with navigating having to have that parent's needs be the priority
For everyone. That's right.
And I told them, and they were surprisingly receptive to, well, how do we navigate this? And I think part of that comes from the fact that we were in a moment where our family was very fractured. A moment where I was the only one of me and my sibling that was really communicating with my parents. And I think that they kind of had this outlook of, well, we can't lose both of them. And so it came about, well, how do we mend this relationship so that it's stronger?
Right.
So that you're getting what you need, but nothing's being, like, we're both compromising.
Yeah.
And therefore not compromising both of our needs. And so I've been able to set so much clearer boundaries with my parents in particular, and saying, this is how I communicate. I send my mom, like, Instagram reels of, like, this is how I show up in the world.
Right.
Like, this is something I relate with. And she watches them and she learns, and she's taken the time to learn about the ways that my autism makes me show up differently.
Yeah.
And it's been very helpful, I think, in a lot of ways for all of us, because autism being so heavily genetic.
Yes, it is.
And knowing, one, I suspect both of my parents are neurodivergent, and two different types of neurodivergent.
Right.
And so I think giving them information about how I present has, in some ways, without them knowing it, given them information about themselves so that we all communicate better.
Yeah. And I know that you were very afraid of the reception of this, right? And a lot of the times what I hear is, my family won't care, my family won't change, my family doesn't believe this. I've had other diagnoses. They just think it's this, they just think it's that. That's a very common dialogue that I have with lots of people. And I will say that that is rarely the outcome. I'm not saying never, but it's rarely the outcome, right? Because it's not that your family didn't notice that there were things, they just said, oh, that's just you being quirky, right? You're a little weird, you're this, you're that, right? Or you're bitchy in the way you say something. That's often the word that I hear when it comes to females, right? And or you're over dramatic, or you're overreacting, your emotions are too big for the situation, or whatever the situation is, right? But once they start to understand a little bit, they start to go, oh, well, this makes sense. And the other thing that's happening is you've become very regulated, right? So how is it becomes very hard to say, oh, this isn't working, when you're happier, you're literally healthier, right? You're in your first really reciprocal relationship that's working for you for lots of different reasons, right? You're asking for what you need, you're setting good boundaries, you're very successful in what you're doing. It's very hard to argue that you're not better off today than you were a year and a half ago, right? So that becomes hard for people to argue with, whether they understand it or they don't. If things are clearly better for you, what's the argument? Right? No, I don't want to communicate differently. I want to yell and scream at you, or I want to call you name. I mean, that's not a legitimate argument, right? And today you wouldn't tolerate that. But that hasn't really happened either, right? Not in that way. You have, when it has happened, you have set the boundary, and it's been responded to in a pretty appropriate way, more so than expected, right? So those things have happened. In your relationship, you were pretty clear on who you were and what you needed by then, right? What you needed from a partner, what you were looking for. So you were able to ask for those things. You were able to also take accountability and say, yeah, maybe this is going on, but I have some accountability if I'm going to be successful to learn how to understand what's happening in my body, what's going on with my language, how I have to care for myself differently, and how I have to set myself up for success. So it's not that you're going around the world going, hey, I have a disability, so I'm going to need you all to change how you're behaving so that this works for me. That's not what we're saying. We're saying this has to be reciprocal, right? Neurotypical people may have to understand something differently as you're understanding something differently, right? And so how that works together, everyone wins. And I think people tend to be more receptive than people think when they talk about it. People could be minimizing and say, well, everybody's got acceptabilism or things like that, right? Or you don't look autistic, I've got that one.
Mm-hmm.
I know, yeah. So, and you're successful and you're smart. How could you possibly? And this is just a lack of understanding. So, what I hear you saying overall is me understanding myself, learning to care for myself, and having the right tools that I needed made all the difference in how I was able to engage in the world and show up and be successful.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like too much to ask for, does it? No. What would you want to share? What would you want people to know about this?
In terms of,
Are you making recommendations? Or are you saying this is what we're like? What would you want someone who's struggling to like hear today?
that your needs are important, just as important as the next person's,
Right.
and that you don't have to shove them away thinking that you're the problem.
Right. I think that's great. Would you recommend people get a diagnosis? Is that something that you think is important?
I think diagnoses work when they work and they don't when they don't. And I think that's really individual to the person, but what I can say is having my diagnosis, being able to understand myself and gain the language to understand how I show up in the world has made all the difference. I think language is agency. And
Yes.
having the ability to put words, put ideas to my experiences has made me understand myself better and has made me understand who I am as a person for the first time in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming in today and being vulnerable and sharing so much about yourself. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, please give us a call. We look forward to hearing from you.